Open Stage would like to acknowledge the Susquehannock peoples, upon whose unceded land we produce this show. Open Stage commits to the work of dismantling the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism and the exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples that continue today. At Open Stage, we also believe that Black Lives Matter, and you should too. That belief starts with acknowledging plainly how the systems we depend on often operate as if they don't. We at Open Stage proudly stand united with Black people and communities of color during this movement of unrest and uprising. This show is brought to you by Open Stage, a professional theater company. Check out Open Stage's complete list of shows, all of which are offered completely free this season at openstagehbg.com. Thank you and enjoy the show.
Sup, humanoids? Sup, humanoids? Sup, humanoids? It's E-Man. I'm just like you. I'm just like you. I'm just like you. Oh! Huh? Eh? Just go out there and live your damn life! Woo! Just live your damn life! It's fine, just go out there and live your damn life!
Hello?
Demon, you're dead.
I could have come. I stayed away because it weren't cheerful. And that's why I ought to have come. I've never liked this place. Maybe because it's down in a hollow and you don't see the road. I don't know what it is, but it's a lonesome place and always was. I wish I had come over to see Minnie Foster sometimes. I can see now.
Oh, I've come early.
Nonsense. Early does not exist in the eyes of destiny. Sit. Sit. I have a pot of soup ready to cook. It will take a bit, but I welcome the company.
Thank you. This is just what I need to cure my spirits. I feel as if the entire day has gone by and cannot pin down a thing that has happened in it. And any day that occurs as such, I count as a terrible day.
Now, a terrible day can be turned on its head by a good night.
Did you have a terrible day? I'm sorry.
Oh, I must not complain. I've had much worse.
I empathize with you. I was quite restless today.
Is not that every day?
Your tongue is sharp today, I see.
I meant for myself, too.
Soup's on. It will need a bit before it's ready.
I'm sure it is worth the wait. It smells delicious.
What was that?
It sounded like a steed.
Madam, do you expect anyone else round the fire tonight?
I never expect anyone. I only hope.
Will I hear it no more? Perhaps it was only someone passing by.
Odd to be out so late.
I do not think it odd. May I remind you, we are all here.
Lord, but it got close very quickly.
A lone horseman wandering in the night? Could it be?
Do not say the name. Perhaps you will encourage him to approach.
What a rash thing, to assume that any passing rider is...
But just the same, do not let us secure the possibility.
Excuse me. Can I sit by your fire for a moment?
Oh, thank the Lord.
Sorry?
Oh, pay him no mind. We heard your steed and thought you were someone else. Welcome, stranger. Please, sit. You look weary.
Thank you. It has been a long journey. I've been waiting for a moment to give the horse a rest and stretch my legs.
Are you hungry? Madam is making some soup.
Of course he's hungry. The man looks like he hasn't had a meal in a week.
The journey was arduous, though I did stop for sustenance a ways back. I was hoping to reach my destination before nightfall, but one is not always so lucky.
Is Sleepy Hollow your aim?
It is.
Well, then you have reached it. We are just on the skirts of town, but at this hour, you won't see another living soul for miles.
Well, I am glad to have reached my destination, and I'm glad to finally be in Sleepy Hollow. I've been studying this town for some years now.
Oh, you've been studying it?
Yes, Sleepy Hollow and its rumors of oddity. Apparitions in the night, trances and visions coming upon even travelers by. Such talk has reached my ears from afar, and I cannot but seek it out.
A gleaming land of drowsy head it was, of dreams that wave before the half-shut eye, and of gay castles in the clouds that pass forever flushing round a summer sky.
Yes, I have heard that one before. In the great span of conversation about the paranormal, Sleepy Hollow crops up abundantly.
We were just whispering about ghost stories, weren't we?
Oh, are you fans of a grim tale?
It is hard not to be. Given the fire and the eerie nature of these woods, we find ourselves led to such conversation frequently. And as you said, Sleepy Hollow is abundant in its talk of such things.
You haven't come for the talk itself, have you?
Other business brings me to the vicinity, but the added benefit of the talk certainly sweetens the visit. Like a moth to a flame, I've come.
And like that moth, you will find your peril. That is the call of Sleepy Hollow.
No need to use such incendiary language.
The madam has spoken. She likes her fires nice and amiable. Isn't that right?
Oh, I didn't mean harm. But it's the truth. Lovely madam, you wish to ease his fears, but I tell you it's far better for the man to worry. Mark my words. There is nothing in this town you'll be wanting, boy. Not if you want what's good for you. This place is bewitched. It is said that in the early days of the settlement, a high German doctor lay a curse on it in retribution for some old spite regarding the townfolk.
No, not a curse, and not a doctor. It was an old Indian chief who held powwows here before the country was discovered by Master Hendrik Hudson. He was a prophet or a wizard or some such, and his preternatural effect lay like a blanket over the town since his death.
Not how I heard it.
Well, however the story goes, the town continues under the sway of some witching power, some sort of spell over the minds of the good people, causing them to walk in an eternal reverie.
Yes, the eternal reverie. I've heard that is the case. But you cannot count yourselves included in such state. I find you all amiable and very present. Not at all dreamlike.
Well, we are residents of Sleepy Hollow, that much is true. We gather on such cold nights to receive the kindly hospitality of the madam, but we find ourselves included in the strange little curse when we leave the warmth of the fire. Perhaps the madam casts her own spells on us when we gather here.
The madam does not curse us.
A counter-curse, perhaps. The weary traveler is right. I feel a bit lucid now.
Well, a curse certainly makes sense for all the stories that have accumulated. It would be wonderful to hear such tales from the town's very own residents.
I dare say we could tell you a few.
It is good to hear that you all persevere in keeping those stories alive.
Is that not the objective of stories? To keep them alive, and so in turn, keep ourselves alive?
What, shall we die without story?
Many ghost stories are cautionary tales.
And yes, I believe we would die without story. Our spirits, at least.
And the spirits that the stories speak of are certainly kept alive in their retelling.
The spirits are dead.
Back in my own village, there is no encouragement for ghosts. The tales are few and far between. Though I should say, the blame may fall upon a constant desire for travel. Any ghost would scarcely have the time to finish their first nap and turn themselves in their graves before their surviving friends had traveled away from the neighborhood, so that when they turn out in the night to walk their rounds, they have no one left to call upon.
Sleepy Hollow does not abide by such rules. Most of the townfolk have lived here all their lives. Many come, that is for sure, but few leave this sleepy little place.
Come now, you make it sound like a horror story.
How quickly you assume I had a negative connotation. It may be, perhaps, that the citizens of Sleepy Hollow simply enjoy being here.
I would believe a horror story over the likes of that. We all have our own personal tales that we could tell of Sleepy Hollow.
And such tales they are. They cannot be that bad if we are still here to tell them. Whatever form of aggrandizement we place upon the ghosts of old, they cannot be so ferocious that we still find ourselves here in Sleepy Hollow.
You are correct, dear stranger. Our worried friends are putting silly notions in your head. If there were such a curse on this sleepy little hollow, it is not a bad curse. My life boasts just as much contentment as the next. No. I believe that while some of these tales are true, I do not deny that for a second. Most are only superstition and hearsay.
Hearsay? I've seen things with my own eyes.
Then why do you reside here still?
I don't rightfully know.
Pray tell, if you have a story, I would love to hear it. I am curious as to what you have seen.
Then I shall be glad to tell it. I'm sure you have heard of the late Major Andre.
I have not.
That is a surprise, for I should think of all the stories of Sleepy Hollow, Major Andre's should be widely known.
Or at least the poor wretched soul's name, Major Andre, the man who struck a deal with Benedict Arnold?
I have not heard the name.
Let me tell you the story. John Andre was a British lieutenant involved in the defense of St. John's, which, I hope you know, the Americans took in 1775. He was taken as a prisoner of war and transferred to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Now, Andre was such a charismatic young man. He was well educated, and in his time as prisoner of war, became well liked by many. Perhaps that gave him more freedom than the American soldiers realized, for in 1780 he made secret negotiations with Benedict Arnold for the surrender of West Point in exchange for £20,000. You at least must have heard of that. Now, he was returning to New York after his secret liaison when he met 3 American militiamen near Sleepy Hollow, right by that old tulip tree in the middle of town. Now, I know not what words were exchanged, but old Andre must have mistaken one of the men for a Hessian, and therefore thought the men to be loyalists, consequently revealing himself as a British officer. Now, what do when a well-loved man betrays your country? You must try him for espionage. There's no way around it. That's the way the world works. But Andre had many men fighting for him, to be sure. The British Army attempted to exchange Arnold for Andre, to no avail. Alexander Hamilton himself, who was then Washington's close aide, intervened and requested death by shooting, which was Andre's preference, and by all means would have been a much more pleasant death than a hanging. But Washington made it clear he was to be punished as a spy. So, Major Andre was convicted and executed in October of 1780.
Forgive me, but this does not sound like a ghost story. You said you had seen something to inspire the tale?
Yes, I did say that. His execution was perhaps not worthy of a ghost story, no. But let us examine in our minds the Tulip Tree, which stands on the spot of Andre's capture. Have you seen it? No, of course you haven't seen it. You've only just arrived. Enormous it is, towering like a giant above all the other trees of the neighborhood and forming a kind of landmark. Its limbs are gnarled and fantastic, twisting down to the earth and rising again into the air. It is known universally as Major Andre's tree. It was at this tree that Andre made his mistake and was apprehended, where they searched his pockets and captured him. Many regard the old tulip tree with a mixture of respect and superstition, partly out of sympathy for the fate of its ill-starred namesake, and partly for the tales of strange sights and doleful lamentations told concerning it. Many pass this tree and speak of an ill feeling in the vicinity. And in truth, every time I draw near, I feel something strange in me. There have been nights when I swore I saw a white, hanging something in the midst of the tree, but there was never anything there. I would hear a groan, but it was always the rubbing of one huge bough upon another as they swayed about in the breeze. Yes, there was always an explanation for the noises and the illusions that the fearful passerby might conjure, but never any explanation for the desolation that one feels as they pass Major Andre's tree. It is always much more than just sympathy or uneasiness that one feels near this arboreal beast. It is the sense of despair, of sickened realization, of abandoned hope that only Andre could have felt when he was discovered. What a quick mistake! And what an eternal consequence.
He betrayed our country. I believe that warrants some kind of punishment, though perhaps not execution. The thought of that makes my skin crawl.
He was a British citizen. He lived here for many years, but is a prisoner of war. We condemn Andre as Americans, but I cannot bring myself to condemn him as a human being.
What an admirable story. But there is one detail that fails to follow logic. Why would his spirit haunt the tree and not the grave where his body lies?
Would you be able to get the place of your biggest mistake off your mind?
No. No, I suppose not. Well then, I suppose I must go.
So soon?
Please, return when you can.
What a chilling story. And the way he told it, he sounds deeply affected.
It is a personal tale for him. I have heard him tell this same story many a time around this same fire.
Tell me, does the story remain the same in each retelling?
I beg your pardon?
I sometimes find that the longer a body tells a story, the longer it gets, or more involved.
I think you will find, dear stranger, that for your new acquaintance, the tale is ingrained in his mind and changes not a bit. To change would be a kindness.
Well, it is chilling all the same.
If it's a chill you want, then you must hear the tale of the Lady in White.
The Lady in White?
Sir, you say you've studied the tales of the legend of Sleepy Hollow, but this is now the second story you haven't heard. Pray tell, what stories have you heard?
Perhaps I have heard of this one, if you may remind me of the details.
You have not, but I will. Years ago, there was a young woman in the community by the name of Eleanor Dewalt. She was the daughter of a well-to-do family with a substantial property on the eastern part of town, and there was never a moment when Eleanor ever felt need. She wore her frilly frocks, attended balls and parties, and was never expected to lift a finger in the cooking and the cleaning and the washing and such. She held a privileged position in society. It was never expected to stoop so low. All she had to do was sit and greet those of an equal elevation such as hers, smile, and make good conversation. But Eleanor wanted more. She was often seen staring out the window, fidgeting and sighing, as if the world was just beyond her fingertips. One such part of the outside world was a roguish young man who lived a few minutes' walk down the road. He and Eleonora had met previously at several gatherings, but his sort were not the kind who were seen in conversation with her sort. So it was the two began to court in secret. They would meet under the cover of nightfall by the dark glen at Raven Rock.
A secret love affair? How gauche.
She had found love, sir, something she had not found with even the confines of her own home. And freedom, a sort of freedom in the moments stolen at the glen. And they would have continued to get away with it, without a care of how society would eventually pull them, had a young gentleman not come to call on Eleanora one evening, with the goal of Eleanor's hand in marriage. Her mother and father had been waiting for this. Their daughter finally married into a family that matched her respectability, and so Eleanora found herself in a difficult position. No one knew of her secret beau, and no one would have approved if they had known. And so Eleanora found herself accepting the proposal.
Is it not a blessing for a woman to fulfill her obligation to her family? Accepting this man's hand in marriage was only proper.
How very proper it is for a woman to give up her freedom. Well, Eleanor had this very thought in mind. She knew she had to say goodbye. When the gentleman left her home for the evening, the world began to snow. It felt to Eleanor like an omen. She had previously made arrangements to rendezvous with her beau after everyone had gone to sleep. And so that night, even though the snow began to come down in a horrible power, Eleanor slipped out in the night to meet him. Unfortunate for her, the storm had dissuaded him from going to meet her, and so Eleanor foolishly slipped out to meet a man who would not come. She was found in a snowdrift the next morning, under a tree branch from a nearby tree. It is believed that the storm knocked the bough atop her on her fateful midnight walk. Oh, the talk of the town the next morning, to hear that a proposal had happened, and so swiftly after, a death had followed. Her beau remained quiet, not wanting to be caught up in the whole ordeal, and so her death became speculation. But death could not contain her, it seemed, for it was not long after that Eleanor could be seen gazing out the windows of the Dewalt house, and on stormy nights, Eleanor could be seen at Raven Rock. She was gowned in white, gaunt and colorless as the snow, gazing right through you in search of her beau. Some even said they could hear her shriek, an echo of the moment that the tree had befallen her.
Could it be that she's calling to us now?
Perhaps, or perhaps she is searching for her escape. She never found one in the end.
Going out and getting herself killed certainly wasn't an escape. Imagine being stuck as an apparition instead of living a lavish life such as hers with men at her doorstep and her share of happy little secrets. A life well wasted, if you ask me.
I will leave the storytelling up to the rest of you now. I must be on my way.
Thank you for the tale. Sir, you seem to have a quip for every story told. Perhaps you have a better tale to tell.
I have, in fact. These fine people of whom our company is comprised told wonderful tales, but there is nothing to be afraid of in any of them.
Well, if I were to see a specter, I would certainly be afraid.
Not from the stories these good folk have told. You would just feel sad. How sad for Major Andre, how sad for the lady in white. But both tales easily avoidable.
One cannot state the simplicity of a task without having done it.
Perhaps not. But fear. Fear is the target of a good ghost story. It must remind us of our frail state in life, subject to fate's grasp. A fear brews in all of us. Well, most of us, anyway. And it dictates what our every action shall be. We fear a life of poverty and squalor, so we wake early each morning and set off to do our day's work, to provide for ourselves and for our family. We fear disease and decay, so we fill our bodies with hearty foods that make us feel strong and nourished. But nothing is greater than the fear we instill in each other. Just a few years back, a school teacher was hired here in Sleepy Hollow by the name of Jacob Williams. He was a good man, and always rendered himself both useful and agreeable to those in his community. He would occasionally help the farmers with the lighter labors of their farms, making hay, mending fences, taking the water to the horses, those sort of tasks. But, ingratiated as he was with the parents, he could not seem to sway the children to give him the respect that he asked for. They taunted him in the schoolyard and played cruel tricks on him. They would, on occasion, go to stopping up the chimney of the schoolhouse just to smoke him out. And on more than one occasion, Mr. Williams would open the door to his schoolhouse to find that every desk and chair had been turned topsy-turvy, so that he began to think that every witch in the country were holding their meetings in his very own schoolhouse.
A gullible protagonist for our ghost story.
No, our school teacher is not gullible. If you were to come into a room and see everything strewn about, with the door carefully locked, and no explanation for the arrangement, what might your mind conclude? I should venture to think that you would have the same inklings as Mr. Williams. The torment from the children went on and on, until one day Mr. Williams went for an evening walk by the river. A group of children saw him and decided to follow him into the patch of woods near his residence. I say woods. It was perhaps an acre or two of trees, very densely populated, with a little path running through the middle of it, a common rendezvous point during the daytime hours, but Mr. Williams preferred the walk by moonlight. On the night of this fateful story, it was about midnight. The children should have been in bed. So should he, but that is a matter for another time. Children followed him into this patch of woods. So closely knit were the trees, and so thick around that Mr. Williams could not see the children surrounding him. They began to whisper strange murmurings, to strike fear into the man's heart, so much so that he began to think that there were spirits following him. He began to hurry through the rest of the woods, though hurrying in a wooded path can prove treacherous. And just as he was about to break into the opening, one of the children from behind a tree, from their hiding place, reached out and grabbed Mr. Williams' ankles to give him an extra fright. And that it did. So much so that his heart seized on the spot.
He died of fright?
Perhaps if the school teacher had been a bit braver, he would still be teaching those unruly children, still going on those night walks. But, alas, fear is what gets you in the end. It is an important lesson. Never let fear overcome you. It is a rule I abide by, so much so that such silly stories from our companions past did not ruffle me in the least.
Is fear not the fun of such tales? There would be no reason to tell such stories if your audience didn't want to feel the thrill.
Perhaps, though it shows a truly courageous man whose heart does not quicken at the sight of silly stories. Someone of sound mind and heart. Mr. Williams could not have managed, that is for sure. He died at the hands of a cruel prank. He was found the next morning. Town was shaken by this, and arrangements were made for his funeral. Eventually, a new school teacher was hired, and life went on. But to this day, you can still see Mr. Williams making his way through the wooded path, or perhaps through the window of the schoolhouse, sitting in silent reverie, thinking of the prank that sealed his fate.
Were the students ever punished?
No one ever knew the man had died at their hands. He was found the next morning at the edge of the woods. It was assumed that he had died alone. The children never said a word.
Are you one of the children?
Oh, no. This was just a few years back.
I must ask you to leave now.
Me? Oh, but
Oh, you may return tomorrow evening. You will be late.
Yes. Late, yes. Yes, I suppose so. Thank you, madam. I will return.
Whatever could he be late for at this hour?
My dear stranger, tell me, have you heard the legend of the Headless Horseman?
It has a familiar ring to it.
I thought it might. Allow me to stoke your memory.
Of course. I love a good story.
We have all heard the horseman thundering past at one time or another, said to be the apparition of a Hessian trooper killed in some battle in the Revolutionary War. Legend has it that his head was carried away by a cannonball, and his body was buried at the old church by the bridge in Sleepy Hollow. And now his ghost rides forth to the scene of battle nightly in search of his head.
Have you seen him?
I have lived in Sleepy Hollow since my youth. I was then a most heretical young woman, for I did not believe in ghosts. But my heresy soon changed. One night, I was on the far side of town when I had the misfortune to be jilted. I found myself abandoned, miles from home, and with no one to give me passage. A young lady ought to fear such a situation, but I did not want to make more of it than need be, and so I began to walk. As I journeyed home, I heard a galloping. I turned and looked into the darkness of the grove, and there I beheld a rider most strange, huge, misshapen, towering. He stopped before me, wrapped in darkness, like some hideous creature about to spring upon an unsuspecting victim, his steed panting and blowing. Could not make out his face, though in truth could not make out much of anything. But I was miles from my bed, and oh, how late it was. Abandoning all propriety, I petitioned the rider for aid, and he swung me up on his horse, and away we galloped, over hill and hedge, over bush and briar, until we reached the bridge by the church. And you know the rest.
I beg pardon?
And when we reached the bridge, I looked up into the face of the man who had rescued me and received a terrible fright, for there was no face to perceive, no head atop the man's shoulders. I screamed and flung myself from his arms, off the steed, tumbling into the brook. And then the man, the galloping Hessian of the Hollow, bolted away on his goblin horse and vanished in a flash of fire.
It is an interesting story you tell. I do recognize it.
I shall see you tomorrow night, my dear strangers.